Thelonious Monk was one of the geniuses of modern music. He's an absolute legendary and visionary jazz musician. And here are some pieces of his advice that are really helpful for anyone who plays music. And the first one, a note can be as small as a pin or as big as the world. It depends on your imagination. And for me, this is all about attitude. When I listen to people playing, I can really hear the difference between exactly the same notes if someone is playing it with conviction and real meaning and emotion behind it versus if someone is unsure, they're worried about making mistakes, they're not sure it's the right thing. That sort of thing really comes across in my playing, and I don't think it's talked about enough, the power of the mind to influence your music. And it reminds me of a similar quote, related quote perhaps, from Dizzy Gillespie, the amazing jazz trumpeter. And it's something like this. He was talking to people about, or people were asking him, well, what do you hear in your head when you're playing music, when you're improvising? And he'd say something like, well, people think that what I'm hearing is dooby 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 doo bop, which is what he's playing. But really, he said, what I'm hearing is dooby 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 doo bop. It's not about different things that he's hearing there. It's just the sheer quality, the sheer intensity of what he's feeling there in his mind, in the imagination, before it comes out of the instrument. Hey friends, Morley-Fletcher here, and welcome back to the channel. And this set of tips from Thelonious Monk, there are actually 25 different pieces of advice here. And there's an interesting story about where they came from that we'll get to in a bit. But I'm not going to go through all 25 today. I've picked the ones that are either my favourites or I think are the most important, and I'm going to share some thoughts on why they're so important for you. But if you do want to check out all 25, Adam Neely's got a video that goes through all of them, which you might want to look at. I'll have a link in the description. And the next tip is don't play everything or every time. Let some things go by. Some music just imagine. What you don't play can be more important than what you do play. And I have a couple of these tips from Monk on just little reminders that pop up from time to time. They're that important to me, and this is one of them. And for me, there's the wider thing, which is really important and probably doesn't get thought about enough, about just the importance of space and restraint in music. Leave space, be aware of the space. It's not just the notes you're playing, it's the gaps between the notes. Whether this is all pre-composed or whether you have a bit more control over that when you're improvising or maybe you're composing. But for me, it goes way beyond this as well. It says a lot about your individual voice. And I think that's really important, something we all want as musicians, to have some sort of individual voice. And for me, it's not just how do you play, how does the tone come out, how do you articulate the notes. Something that has a really important aspect on our voice is what we choose to play, the material that we choose to play. So that's one thing worth being aware of. How does this quote relate to that? For me, the voice is not just defined by what you do choose to play, it's equally as much defined by what you choose not to play. So I imagine that, if there's someone who plays everything, all the different styles of music, or within a style, all the different repertoire, that gets pretty bland. There's not a lot to say what is their individual personality. When you're making choices, I play this stuff, and I don't play that stuff. That says a lot more about your personality just by what's left out. And sometimes this is styles, composers, whatever it is. Sometimes it's bits, the aspects of the music. Maybe you're someone who doesn't play fast technical stuff. Maybe you're someone who only ever plays up-tempo stuff. Whatever it is, what you leave out says as much about you as what you leave in. Next tip, whatever you think can't be done, somebody will come along and do it. A genius is the one most like himself. Now, these tips actually come from a saxophonist, Steve Lacy, who, when he was a young saxophonist, played in Monk's band. And these were the notes that he wrote down to capture important lessons that he learned from the experience. Because it's such an experience playing night after night with a great musician like Monk. And I think one of the reasons he captured this, and he captured so many notes, was because Monk, really is one of the guys who is totally unafraid to be like himself. That quote, "A genius is the one most like himself," sounds easy, but it's hard to do, because out of fear, we want to be like all the other people that we look up to. And it really takes courage to be who you are, even if sometimes you're wondering if that means you're going to seem less to people. So, for example, my own story. I'm always tempted by, can I get all the technique? Can I be a really fast player? All that sort of stuff, because I do like that. And I'm impressed by people who do that. And I worry that if I don't do that, people will kind of judge me. But actually, when I look at it, for me, it's much more about melody, rhythms, great time feel. Those are all the sort of things that I really want in my playing. But it takes, it's a struggle to be true to being myself and really embrace that and not chase the other stuff out of fear. Next up, just because you're not a drummer doesn't mean that you don't have to keep time. And obviously this is in a jazz context with a drummer in the group, but I mean, for me, it totally applies to everything. So important. It is everyone's responsibility to have the rhythm, to keep the time. Don't rely on a drummer in a group. Don't rely on the conductor. Don't rely on whatever else it is. Have the strength to do that yourself. Makes such a huge difference. And the next tip, the inside of the tune, that's the bridge, is the part that makes the outside sound good. And for me, this is just a reminder that not everything has to be a highlight. We can obsess about getting everything to sound amazing in music, but one of the things that really helps is contrasts. And sometimes it's the dips in the bits where it's less, I don't want to say interesting, but less in your face or whatever, that provides the contrast that makes the other bits sound really great. So just a reminder there that it's the overall experience. It's not about making everything exciting all the time. Can you relax into bits that are there just to make the rest of it sound good? Now, I could go on and on all this sort of stuff for hours, probably, because there is so much more great advice, so many gems in Monk's tips here. But one that we haven't covered so far is always leave them wanting more. And I want to follow Monk's advice here. But if you do want to check out all 25 tips, then you can go and watch Adam Neely's video on this. And if you'd like the special practice and performance tips that I only share with subscribers, then head on over to playinthezone.com and sign up for the emails. They're free. I've been Morley-Fletcher. Thanks so much for watching. Take care, and I'll see you in the next video.